Go.
Good night, everyone. Thank everyone for joining us for tonight's YouTube Auto Builders Fine Scale Live Show. Um, Tonight we will have Mike Dettinger back with us again. The prodigal son returns, and Ralph Renzetti's joining us. So we are short a Miles and a Barry, but they'll be back with us, of course, on future shows. As you see, Miles doesn't have much trouble catching up with us, and Barry won't either, of course. But so tonight we're starting on a new kit. Um, all of us, some different kits. It's going to be some pretty exciting material. But welcome to the show tonight, and back to the studio, Johnny.
All right, thank you, Andy. I just want to say go to YouTubeModelBuilders.com for all your latest info. And you can check with the Tuesday, Wednesday show schedule, the Saturday live show, and also click the e-mag. Make sure that you sign up for notification for the e-magazine when it comes out. We just had one come out, and it was a really good one. I think we got one coming out in May. Yeah, May will be the next magazine. So anyway, make sure to go to YouTube Model Builders and check the website out and sign up for the e-mag and check all your schedules for the shows. And we'll turn it right back over to Andy now.
All right. So the first couple shows that we've done to kick this series off, we did the BTS section house. A couple shows dedicated to very basic construction, how to assemble, to create a box out of wood, simple stuff. Glues to use, how to cross brace if necessary. The very most basic and premise things. Now we're going to step this up a notch and get into some more serious structure builds, some more particulars, some details. Over the next series of episodes, we're going to be talking about interior and exterior lighting details, about mixed or multimedia construction, where we're using wood and styrene and brass, paper, real glass, like I used on the last one, mixed medium structures to a T. Uh, and we're going to design them around interior framing and interior details and uh, doing various boxes, various interior wall arrangements, and the things so you can see into them to bring a structure to the next level. And one of the things I was targeting with my particular build of the BTS kit, and I think every one of us that built that kit kind of exemplified this, is to take a quite inexpensive kit and to bring it up a notch. So it doesn't matter what you start with. If you start with a $20, $30 DPM kit or a $350 fine scale miniatures or South River Model Works kit, technique is key. What you do to it is key. And a fine scale miniatures kit done with poor technique is not a great result necessarily, whereas a DPM kit or um, a cornerstone kit done with exceptional technique can yield exceptional results, high fidelity and fine scale results. Um, so now all of us this time, we're going to start building some different kits so that we can show more technique at one time. We're not all focused on recreating the same exact kit. It's not going to be as cookie cutter for each of us building it. We'll have various people coming on the show to show different techniques. So I'd like to take a round and show, talk about the kit that I've chosen, what I've chosen to build for the next 3 to 5, 6 shows, however long this goes for, however much material we can put into this, however many different techniques we can show off, and how much interest the community has in it. So, questions are of course welcome, quite encouraged, because the goal is, as I've said from the very beginning of this, is to assuage fear of anything craftsman, fine scale, high fidelity, or whatever terminology you want to put with it. Um, Ralph has a really good definition of fine scale. I'm sure we all have a different definition of exactly what that means to us. In the latest e-mag, I wrote a piece on my definition of fine scale, and I took a good one sentence definition of fine scale and turned it into 11 paragraphs or something. So that is my nature, but where I broke down what those terms mean, and that's what they mean to me. But the end result is the defining characteristic. So I am starting on Imagine That Laser Art kit. These are quite exceptional. I've talked to Nick, who runs this company. I talked to him on the phone for a bit. His, pardon me. Oh, his approach to creating these kits, his philosophy or ideology behind it is quite different than I'm seeing from other manufacturers. This kit is available, can be built in numerous configurations. Left, right of this 1 and 2 configuration or this flat configuration, and it can be built in different. There's a lot of choices. It is kit bash by design. It is an exceptional quality of kit. The detail that's been laser cut into these brick walls is as good as any I've seen. And we're going to have a chance to show a lot of technique, a lot of various techniques, not all of which have I perfected. And we're going to try and experiment like we always do. And I would think that all of us, every time I build a kit, I'm trying different, experimenting with different techniques and playing with them. You know, maybe after I've built 400 or 500 kits, maybe there won't be something to experiment with. But, you know, I'd imagine model railroaders that have been doing this for 50 or 60 years are still experimenting because new techniques are always coming around.
Well,
So,
actually, that too, and you got the old techniques coming back around. So
yeah, and especially with mixed medium, there's so many techniques available to you. You know, if nothing against styrene or plastic kits, and in future shows we are going to do some styrene kits. Nothing against those, but they have when you get into mixed medium, the range of techniques that are required to complete a good kit is just strictly going to be higher. You know, the painting techniques required to get a good finish on brass versus paper versus wood versus hydrocal are just unique. So
that's true. I mean, hydrocal presents its own unique challenges in that the hydrocal likes to suck your paint up. So it's always good to prime that first, and that's what hopefully we're going to do too. And one of the fun things about this series is that we're going to do all different scales too. And you'll see as we go through here, there's a lot of more considerations for different scales. Andy's doing HO, Barry's going to do S, I think Miles is doing O, I'm doing N. And I'm not sure what Ralph's up to. I think he's doing HO as well.
absolutely.
But you know, the interiors for an N scale building, the considerations for that are much different than for, say, an O scale building. O scale building, you'll want to actually use real figures and real chairs and tables and such. Whereas with N scale, you're more like using picture backdrops and layering techniques and such. And you know, there's all sorts of interesting permutations. I mean, I myself am scale agnostic. I like to experiment with all the different scales. I do N because I'm doing T-track down here in Texas. But usually I grew up doing HO and I like ON30. So you know, any of those three scales, I'll just buy kits and just do them. And that's I think what Andy's trying to say is, you know, don't be afraid of a Craftsman kit. Even if it's not laser cut, even if you cut the roof and the walls yourself, don't be afraid. Just give it a try. The worst you can do is mess it up. You go out to the Michaels or the Hobby Lobby and you buy yourself a new piece of balsa wood or basswood. You replace the wood and you try again.
What kit are you building, Mike? You want to tell us about that kit you've got?
Yeah, this is actually a real cool kit I have here too. It's an N scale. Let me see if you see this all here. This is from N Scale Architect, which is very interesting. It's a very unique piece. It has a lot of you know, angles. It has a lot of visual interest. It kind of really gets that nice industrial flavor that we're going through, industrial line side activities. You know, basically you would see it's kind of like a combination smelter / fabrication shop. And it's an older N scale architect kit, so it doesn't have the laser cut walls and such, but it's real interesting because it has these clear templates. They're like on acetate, and with the templates they also have lines for the grain into, you know, the siding. So I have to cut out the siding myself very carefully. And there's two tools that I'm going to be really working on for that piece of it. And one is this nice ruler here with the cork back. You really need that, the cork back, just to keep things from sliding around. If you were trying to do this with the old plastic ruler you had in 3rd grade, or just even a metal ruler, it'll slide all over the place. So the cork is important. The other important thing is you have to always use a fresh razor blade, in your X-Acto knife. I know if you're cheap as me, you kind of find that kind of offensive. You're like, oh, I'm going to use all these X-Acto blades. I'm going to have to throw them out, et cetera, et cetera. But the reality is, compare the price of an X-Acto blade to marring the finish of, a model like this, or having to start from scratch, after, you do 5 cuts and the 6th cut gets screwed up because the blade catches because it's old.
So, Ralph, what are you starting on? No audio, or at least I'm not getting any audio, Ralph.
Yeah, I'm not here.
Yeah, we could give you a second to sort that out while we kind of.
Yeah.
So I've done some preemptive work ahead of time for mine. Of course, we would have to do that. Unfortunately or sadly, as most people know me, I'm not a huge styrene fan, but this is an example. Ralph, how's your audio?
I do.
Yes, you
There
do.
you go.
Tell us about what your project, buddy.
Okay. I ordered a larger FOSS scale models, and because I paid more than a certain amount, they stuck in this hot dog stand. And I figured it's a good starting point because I want to weather the crap out of this thing. And unfortunately, there wasn't very much in the way of instructions with this. As a matter of fact, there was none. So I have all these strips of wood that they don't tell you what to do with it. All these ones here are basically all the same size, the thin ones. And then this one's about 1/8 of an inch square. No description of what to do with it. I haven't opened up their other kit, so I can't speak to the other kit, whether the instructions are better, but I would have expected it to be good for this, but it doesn't say much. It's not that I'm new to the game, so I've done a lot of crap or dealt with a lot of crap before, so I think I can deal with this. And once I start weathering it, what's that?
Generally speaking, that's a deciding factor between a Craftsman kit and some of the other kits. I mean, I'm a huge fan of like American Model Builders and Bar Mills and Branchside Trades and I like those kits, but their instruction manuals are very, very simple. They're a couple folded pages. Whereas like this, imagine that laser art kit come with just exceptional instructions with colored pictures inside, with examples for how to do all the detailing from painting. And I mean, the instructions are a decisive difference. And as you get into like fine scale miniature kits and, South River Model Works kits and some of those, their instructions are just exceptional.
Well, in fact, they have CDs too with pictures of the finished product, which is really kind of cool.
Yeah. Now, once I get this thing finished, or basically finished, I got this other one. It's Imagine That laser art as well, and it's a background building. But like Andy said, the brickwork detail and the options that they give you blanked out windows, like really blank up top, or bricked out windows. And if you want to pop them out, you can put window glazing in, because they give you the window frames and everything in laser cut plywood
and separate window seals, and everything is separatable components and choice. That has been just an amazing thing, is that you can build it in so many different ways. Like the corbel at the top of it. I think you call that a corbel, but the framing at the top of it, they have a stack of different choices that these things come with. And you can build these things in so many different, not just, structural configuration, but in the trim work configuration. So you could build up a various stack of trim detail across the top of this structure. And it's designed into this structure to have all of those choices for how to do that. So
I also have this one if I decide. This is the one I originally got from them. It's a service station general store,
Mm-hmm.
and it does have instructions in it. I just checked.
Yeah, I think Doug wanted you to be his beta tester on that hot dog stand, Ralph.
Well, it's interesting because I saw the ad, buy a model for so much and we'll send you this free. And I thought, well, shit, I can use one of those.
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
It looked kind of interesting. So I figured, what the hell? Go for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So, and I know we all have a few different techniques. All these structures are just going to be built with some different criteria. I've been playing with a few techniques for getting good brick results, and tonight I'm gonna paint this on camera, so I won't get a chance to do mortar. We'll have to come back and do the mortar on an additional show. And we could probably have a big discussion about exactly how to get the best mortar effects. A lot of people just use a dilute paint, but I've got a different material for creating that. I've done it a few ways myself with powders. In a few different ways, but I've got a different material that we'll try in the future. But I got a pretty decent effect, in my opinion, on this styrene kit, even the first time out, just using a selection of cheap red paints on top of a primer coat. So I have pre-primed a few sections of walls so that I could get paint on those. And then I've also primed a set of windows and doors so that we can come and do some work on initially weathering those as well. This can also come with some things like this loading dock that is just exceptional, and they laser cut the weathering into it. So while I had to paint and weather and assemble, obviously the supporting structure, this is straight. The top of this is straight out of the box with that detail, and it's laser cut. Distress and nail holes is laser cut into this from factory, and it's really something. And this is not a kit like a fine scale miniature or South River Bottom Works. This is not a $350 kit. This is $100 and a touch US dollar kit that from a small manufacturer that's really nice to work with. I emailed him and then ended up getting on the phone and talking to him for a few minutes. He's just a really interesting fella with a really interesting company, and I like supporting the other modelers anyway. So and it come with a tremendous amount of detail. I mean, it come with these it come with a rooftop tower, which they sell that separately as the rooftop detail kit. They come with these roof stairwell exit kits. They come with a lot of doors, including security fencing material. It come with crates. It come with pallets. It come with ductwork in several components with banding on the ductwork. If we get stopped because of paint drying, I may assemble some of those detail parts tonight. So I'm gonna do a little painting. If one of you guys wants to break your kit out and talk through it, explain what you guys are going to do next, I'll get set up to slap some paint on.
Well, first little tip: I have this angle block. A lot of you guys use 1, 2, 3 blocks. I don't have those yet, but I use this angle block, which welders use for doing 90 degree, and I have rare earth magnets on it. If you're going to be using a steel rule, don't let it go, because it'll go straight to the magnets. The magnets will rip it right out of your hand. But they're great for clamping down the wood against the steel. As far as the wood sides are, I guess it's a basswood. I did it last night. I used Hunter line stains. There we go. So I stained it dark. Well, it's not really a dark. It's called light gray.
Yep.
So
Like
that's
gray
what yep.
or driftwood too. That's the other good one too.
Yep. Well, driftwood, that's debatable because nobody makes driftwood like they used to make when Floquil had it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely not flocal driftwood, but it gives you a nice effect too. And I like to mix and match.
Sometimes I mix them together if I
Mhm.
want a really dark under structure or substrate. So I did that last night. They're dry. They didn't warp at all, but I'm still going to reinforce them.
Mhm.
And that's where I'm at right now. I'm cutting the strips to reinforce it. And I'm assuming that's what this eighth inch stick is for. So we'll see how it goes.
That's about the right size for reinforcing stock. And just before we jump over to Mike for just a second, something I want to mention before we distracted. This kit is made with MDF, and it's quite rigid. And in his instructions, and from other people I've looked at online that have built his kits, they don't appear to need structural integrity added to them. I shouldn't have to cross brace it.
It's because there's no internal grain to it.
Yep.
That it doesn't matter if it gets wet, it might swell, but it's not gonna warp.
Right, it's not going to curl up on me. That's a nice feature. And generally speaking, that's a nice feature. But very specifically, since I want to include a lot of interior detail through all the windows and such in this, being able to do interior detail, that's to die for. All right, Mike, let's see that kit you got.
All right.
What's your plan for it?
Oh, geez, I'll tell you, I'm still like looking through the pieces at this point here. Although I may just do put some glass in the windows first, and well, let me kind of go through what we have here too. So I did talk about the templates. There's a whole 4 sheets of templates that basically lay them out, cut them out. Also have. It looks like some board and batten type, and there's two different sizes of it. So there's a bunch of different wood grains and such. Also found that there's some cardboard in the kit as well, and I assume that this is just for interior bracing and substructures.
What do they suggest to use for the roof?
I think actually for the roof, it was actually kind of cool because they have a little bit lighter cardboard, and then they have this roof paper here too with a little bit of texture on it.
Okay,
so it looks like there's some serious interference pattern there on the TV, but
yeah. So the cardboard you're definitely going to have to reinforce because
right.
if you paint one side of it or glue to one side, it'll work for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that just kind of sits on top there. Also, they have there's some more of these sheets. I got a lot of wood sheet. There's a little sheet of, it looks like foam core with a brick front embossed in the front. So it looks like this will be for the foundation. We got tons and tons of strip wood pieces of various sizes. Obviously, I think there's like the ubiquitous 1/8 inch square, which is probably for interior bracing and such, to a lot of this very fine little, I guess they would be N scale 4x4s or such. And then I have the windows and ladders.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so this is kind of complete now. The one thing too that I think in this build, and Andy was telling me that we want to look at signage and working with signs. And if he gone through, paid attention to the inventory and all, that's one thing I don't have is signs. So I will be scouring the internet looking for appropriate signs for this building too, so I can get more like, like the warning signs that would be all around a hazardous place like this, safety first and such. And also thinking in terms of what kind of big lettering I want on the building itself too, just to kind of get an idea. I think they call this the Wharton Ironworks. So I have to figure out how I want that to look, that kind of things. Whether I want to do like a painted stencil type of deal where I want to do dry transfers, or do I want to just print something out and then boss it on. In fact, actually, let me grab this real quick. If you give me a second. Oh, that's over here. Okay. Now, I mean, one thing is, if you think in terms of paper as a sign, and you're like, oh, well, I put it on there, but it'll stand out. It won't contour to the shape of the walls and such. That's not the case. Actually, what you can do is you can sand it down. If you take a good look here at this building here I was working on before, this is a little cafe, and it has the main feature is this big bread sign on the side painted on. And what I did to make the paper more malleable is to just lightly sand the back. And because I really wanted that to be old looking, like really beat up, I actually sanded the front a little bit too, just to take some of the color off. And what I was able to do was wet the paper, just kind of get it damp, and put in some nice wet glue, 50-50 mix, and really work the sign into the grooves of the siding. And it really came out pretty nice.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking in terms of doing something like that for the main signage as well on the top of this building.
That siding, was it contoured? Like, was it shiplap or board on board, or?
Yeah, this kit here was from Nick and Nora.
Okay.
And it was a it was like a board and bat. No, it's not board and batten. It's actually the other one's probably like shiplap.
Because
Yeah,
I
it
have
doesn't have
a
the thing sticking out.
technique if you want. I think it's in the latest issue of YouTube Model Builders,
Mm-hmm.
where I did a clinic on doing signs like that.
Yeah.
And you print it out on tissue paper.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah, this was regular paper.
Back or anything. You print it out on tissue paper, and it's much easier to take on the contour of the wall you're putting it on.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a great idea. Yeah, start with thinner paper.
Highlights.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think we'll have a good time when we get to doing some signage. And that's kind of, the detail of the signage and stuff is really the kind of the cat's meow of doing these structures anyway. That, I've said before, probably just talking on regular hangouts and such, that, humans are pretty messy creatures. And if you're going to model something that looks anything close to the real world, your layout or diorama or structure has to, they have a lot on them. We from graffiti in the modern era to a whole lot of signage to newspapers to stuff being stuck on the wall, and like Ralph's technique for doing that signage on it is really good. Seems to work quite well. I think I'm going to use when we get to that point, with wet paint. I won't be able to get there tonight, but I've got some dry transfer letters, and I'm going to use those dry transfer letters and paint a backdrop color, put dry transfers on. That's, I believe that's going to be my plan for that.
There's one of the signs I did.
Oh, very nice. Oh, that's beautiful.
And it's thin enough so that you see the imprint behind it. You can use your thumb to push it into the grooves. And then when it was all dried, I went back with a piece of 400 grit emery paper and just sanded the high points.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, when you print it on the tracing paper, you don't print it at full strength. You print it at draft mode. So it's already sort of weathered before you get, before you get there. And because it's thin, like you had to peel off the back of your paper in order to thin it out a bit.
Mhm.
You don't have to do that to this, and it ends
Yeah.
up thinner, and you guarantee that you have the same thickness of sign every time. You can do
I
it on
tell you,
paper or what's that paper they use for gift wrap? Tissue paper.
Tissue paper,
yeah.
yeah.
You can print it either way. I use tracing paper here.
I'll tell you what, I've done a few of those several times, done those sides where you would sand the back of the paper, and that is a quite hard technique to kind of master. Once you've got it, that's fine, but I have sanded through quite a few sides before I, found the right touch.
Yep.
Mm.
So I want to, like I did on this plastic, I want some diversity of brick color, because while the bricks are, and Miles actually says this, actually I've seen him say it a few times, but I think he said it in a Woodland Scenics video that I quite liked of his, and he said that the companies that buy bricks to build a structure, they buy a pallet, a lot of brick. They don't buy diversity, so they tend to build the entire structure with it. But there's a lot of diversity in color that gets into these. I mean, even if you look at the face of a singular brick in front of you, it has a lot of color diversity there.
Mhm.
And I was messing with this other one, and I played with makeup sponges as well. But one of Ralph's tricks for doing weathering on some rolling stocks and locomotives is this quite hard packing foam. It's a type of closed cell foam, and if you tear the edges off from it like I did and get you a coarse texture on it, it seems to leave or give me a better control of the texture of paint applied. I can press quite hard to get a much more full color to it, or I could, press much more gently to get just kind of, a little bit of additive textured color, as we go, as it applies. So as I take, a brighter red color, get some of that off there, I could, come in very lightly and fill in some of these little small gaps where I've slowly, where I just left some of the exposed primer coat. And then in these areas where I don't have much, you can press harder and get quite a bit of color, but it applies it unevenly. And that's all I did to get the discoloration on this one that was. I used some different brick colors. So, and the wood will likely, even though I primed it, there's a decent chance that I'll have to come over it with with an additional coat, because I could see the color's taking, but I can still see a lot of my primer color through it. So,
Andy, isn't this the building you wanted to do?
I do. I absolutely want to build that kit. I'm going not want to. I'm going to build that kit.
So side hotel.
Yeah. At some point, I'm going to build that kit. Maybe when we start doing some city structures, at some point in a future show, I think we've got a lot of material to cover that, that I wanted to see as a community member, or want to see as a community member, and that other community members want to see. We've got to cover some styrene. I want to do some hydrocal. We got a lot to do, but at some point, I do want to build that kit on a live show or not. I just want to build that kit. It's just a really good kit. But so far, I'm quite pleased with this manufacturer stuff. And I mean, in general, I'm pleased with it, but especially for price. That weighs into this stuff. If you've got a whole layout to build, it's, quite hard for most of us to fill an entire layout with, Fine Scope Miniatures, South River Model Works, some of those companies, while I plan on using some of their kits as well, you've got to do something that's within, within budget. And when you could buy these kits at a comparable price to a high-end plastic kit,
Yep.
that it's, it will make some sense. So
That's
Tom, or Split Rock rather, if you're having some lag problems, there's a couple things that cause that. One, you could just refresh the screen, refresh your YouTube live stream. Just reload the page. That'll help sometimes. Also, if it's having a hard time keeping up, you could just pull it back, pull the the transporter, the bar at the bottom. Just pull it back so that you're running about 10 seconds behind or something, 5 or 10 seconds behind. And that will help it keep up a little easier, it seems.
So the refresh is control R, right?
Control R on a Windows system or Command R on a on a good computer. I mean, an Apple computer.
Here we go.
A pseudo Linux box, you mean?
That absolutely. Well, that's the reason that I ended up with him. I was a Linux guy, and Apple is very close to Linux, but you can still run Photoshop and Microsoft Office on it. So they're all about the same anymore. I love the argument. Anybody who knows me on the Hangouts knows that I like a good debate about as good as anything in the world. But they're all about the same anymore. I mean, that's the same thing, the argument between HO and N-scale. At this point, it's a matter of preference because you can hand-lay N-scale track. You can have all the details in N-scale. They operate well. You could run an operational railroad. All of those things are possible in N-scale as well these days.
Isn't N-scale dying?
I think. I think Lionel Strang is convinced that it is. For good comedy's sake, he is anyway.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, you get the best of both worlds. You do HON30.
There you go. I like that idea.
Well, I think the future of the hobby is most likely in scale, and largely because we just don't have as much space to, and maybe we even have larger homes, but we don't have enough space to dedicate to our railroads, or a lot of people don't. Nobody or very few of us have as much space as we would like to have. So, and N-scale lets you build a heck of a railroad in a quite confined space. So, let's do some of this.
I have to admit that.
I do too. And I considered N-scale when I got back in the hobby a few years ago. I didn't have any equipment. I could have chose any scale that I had wanted to. And I looked seriously at N-scale, but, I wanted some fairly meticulous detail. And I wasn't sure that I could do it in N-scale. I knew I could hand lay an HO scale and stuff, but. So how you guys coming along?
Oh, I got it.
Where you at with it? How about finishing techniques? What are you guys are you just, I guess with yours, Ralph, you probably paint the individual parts, but.
Well, before you get to the finishing, I think one thing that should be mentioned, if you're going to stain your walls before, the reason for it, if you don't stain before and you get glue or overlapping of glue, the stain won't take where the glue is.
Absolutely.
So you do it before and then glue it together and you don't have that issue.
But I will say this is the first structure that I've always stained the components, the sub-assembly components first. I absolutely do that because they won't take through. But anytime I paint, I normally assemble the superstructure and paint, so I get the advantage of using the paint as a gap filler and such.
Right.
This time, I'm going to build each wall section, coloration, any weathering that can be put on there and finished to where it will stay. I'm going to set the windows with the glass in them that I use, that Sierra Model Works scale glass. I'm going to put my signage on it, all my details and ductwork, and then set the wall assemblies together and put the cap plates. So, but this will be my first time doing it that way. But with the level of detail we want to do.
And it's all up to the individual, right?
Absolutely. I mean, there's,
as we've discussed before, fine scale modeling is all the individual. It's not necessarily the kit.
No.
It's how you finish it.
Yep. It
And
lets you be an artist in the truest sense of the word.
Yep.
Yep. Let your creativity run wild.
and make sure you stay sober while you're doing it.
You start working with these high-end kits, you know, I mean, you're going to put somebody into, you know, from detail parts. Well, and you know, it's an investment. All of this stuff is an investment, but it's not just an investment of money. You know, there's a significant investment of time in these structures, and you know, if you've put a bunch of time into it, you're going to want to continue to pay attention through the entire process. And you know, I just massively enjoy doing it, so I would hate to spend a whole bunch of time and then, you know, then mess it up too much. But you know, the thing I love about wood is it's quite easy to repair or correct mistakes.
Yeah, it's very forgiving.
Yes.
And here I thought you did things a certain way so that you can argue with me.
Well, I mean, those are not mutually exclusive things. I retain the ability to argue with you sometimes, just because. Like I've said before, the best information comes out of the lively, respectful debate. If you just agree with each other, then people only hear one way. And while I will agree that there are some wrong ways to do things,
Yep.
but there are a whole lot of right ways.
That's for sure.
I haven't got a chance to look up and catch up with your all's work in a second. I want to see that kit you're working on in a second. I'm gonna stop and check out your work too, Ralph. I ain't got a chance to. I really seriously looked at a Foscale kit, but I couldn't tell enough about it to be sure I would be happy with it. And I think that your lack of instruction is basically is they suffer from the same thing when it comes to their website too, because there's just not enough information there to be able to make a good judgment.
That's true. But then I've noticed over the past little while their kits are getting more elaborate and the prices are going up.
Oh yes.
And they're getting into the FSM range,
Sure.
which is George Celios stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, George has been doing it for how long? And
40 or 50.
Since the dawn of time, since most of us are playing with plastic fill, George was doing this.
Exactly. And his kits are really sought after.
Yeah,
Well,
for good reason.
And the thing is, though, they're complete. They're total. They have all the detail parts.
Yep.
They have everything you could think of. I mean, you know, the Bordello has shoes on the windowsill.
Yes.
You know, I mean, it's just insane how much thought he put in these kits.
Well, the instruction manual that comes with each of his kits is essentially a primer on, you know, on how to take that structure to that exceptional level. So
That's right. I mean, you could spend like $30 or $40 just for an FSM instruction manual on eBay.
yep.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
right.
that's not without anything. It's just the instructions.
Or the empty box.
Well, the empty box, that's another story. There's one crazy guy who sells empty boxes for everything.
Yep, I've seen a bunch of people selling those. Now, I think their instructions are probably worth a pretty good. I mean, even to me personally, just in sheer value, I think the instructions from an FSM kit would be worth something to you.
Well, the thing is, George signs everything that he does.
Mm.
So
He's a unique one.
it's funny. I went to see his layout. I was at one of the fine scale expos in Peabody. And
Peabody.
yeah, I
Peabody.
went to see his layout. And I thought, oh, great. I'm finally going to get to see it. I brought my camera the whole bit. I walk in, they said, no photographs.
Oh, that stinks.
And the reason being, he was in the process of sampling out one of his new kits and he had it on his layout. and somebody came in, took a photograph of it, and ended up putting it out before he did.
Oh, that's brutal.
So he after that he stopped. He wouldn't allow people to take photographs.
You know, that's espionage. So
Yes, it
I
is.
guess, and you would not think that amongst model railroaders that even manufacturers or whatever, that espionage would be so quite common, but or that it would even happen. But
Well, when it comes to rail cars and locomotives, rail cars are not an issue, but locomotives, I wish some of these manufacturers would talk to each other, and instead of putting out the from 3 different manufacturers, put out something different so
The
that there's a
problem
little
is
bit more variety.
the problem is the 3 manufacturers get them all from the same place in Korea.
Yeah.
the problem is
So
they're
I
all
guess they
seeing
do
the
talk
same
to each other.
demand. Well, they're all seeing the same demand for product, but and it takes a few years. You know, I mean, it was really interesting to watch the Scale Trades video as to watch how those guys went through the multi-year process of research and engineering and taking that big blow turbine to market. You know, that's a fascinating video on Trademaster TV. It's a free video too for anybody that doesn't have a subscription, and it's a really good watch about how committed these manufacturers have to be that are in whether it's a locomotive or a structure. That's a fine scale locomotive, and to
Yeah.
get that product to market, how invested they have to be. So there's a reason why some of these kits cost $300 in the structures market, or why a locomotive may cost quite a few hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for especially brass, because of the commitment of intellectual energy.
That's a very good point. The other thing that's interesting with scale models too is the fact that they have different levels of detail on their kits. You know, I mean, you can get one that's the basic, I guess they call it layout quality or Hostler quality or something. Operator, yeah, there you go, operator quality. And you basically put that next to their the next level up, or the high level, and you can tell what parts they left off. And the operator level, that's a nice little model. It's good to take to shows and stuff, run at the club. And then you have the high fidelity, the ultimate prototype, and it is exquisite. The use of etched brass and such. It's just amazing. And I think that's an interesting concept that they did to basically offer different levels. It's kind of like what cars do too. Different tiers, right? Exactly. And the different tiers, and then you could have people coming in on the operator tier, and then they can say, "Oh, well, I like the prototype tier," and then they'll basically switch out. So
So, and I'm also going to paint a few individual bricks on mine too. If you see these few standalone bricks that are like a dark brown or a bright red. So, and I haven't found a brush that I can paint a brick with. So painting it with a skewer has seemed to work pretty well for me, but just flatten the end of the skewer out.
I was going to suggest a toothpick, but a skewer's good. That's just as good.
Yeah, I started out thinking I'd use a toothpick, and I painted a little dude for the interior of an automobile on my layout, and I used toothpick. Worked great. Just bite the end a couple times to kind of expose. Well, I mean, that's what did it.
I was going to say that works. That works.
Good deal. Well, let's go get caught up with the Q&A here in a minute. Sure. Audie, if you want to give us some questions for the Q&A while we're at a stopping point.
Yeah, I got Bill Rogers. Andy, what colors are you using for the bricks? Sorry if you already said, he joined late.
I didn't. Okay, so I've used a selection, and I'm not generally a fan of the apple barrel paint. For most tasks, Again, this is personal preference. It's what works well for you. Ralph likes a certain make of paint, and I'm gonna let him talk about that in a second because I've got a question about that. I use Vallejo a lot and have good luck with it. But for working with the wood structures, the apple barrel's not bad if you dilute it a little with just water. Doesn't seem to take real good with alcohol for me, but
What's
I've
your
used an apple barrel. This is Tuscan Red, 21467 Echo. I've got a little bit of flag red. This is really bright, and I actually took the flag red and muted it down with some brown oxide. The flag red is 21469 Echo. I used a little bit of brown oxide, 20511. That's what I'm using for the individual bricks. And I had a Flamenco, not Flamingo, Flamenco red, 21468 Echo. But
you know what I like about apple barrel paints, Andy?
Sir.
You know what I like about them? The price, 50 cents at Wally World.
No question. And availability. I mean, you walk in Walmart and they have, 200 colors or something too. So, and for doing scenery and stuff, they're not bad at all. But for me, I personally cannot use them on plastic. They just, I don't know if I don't have the technique right. Actually, I'm probably, quite sure that's the case. I just can't seem to make them work good for me.
All right, Bill Rogers also said miniature painting brushes would work, a number 5/0 or 10/0. AJ wanted to take my job as comedian, so he's asking, bite the end of the skewer before or after you add the paint?
It depends if you want to get radiated or what.
I would say both. It just depends on how tasty the paint is. But the apple barrel just don't taste as good.
And Phil Wyman has got here, Andy, could you hold up the wall that is already painted?
I absolutely could.
And to the camera so we can see the different colors, please. Thanks.
Okay, so let me. This does not take color the same way. This is a Rubbermaid kit or styrene. And it was, my first attempt at playing with these colorations. I've done a couple layers of that, and that's and I'm not even sure the camera does justice. I'm quite happy with it in person, but the camera, it makes it look awful bleached out in here. It's not as light in this section. When I look at it on camera, it's lighter.
But that's okay.
So far, right, the camera is not perfect at the correct coloration. So far, and I've still got layers to do on this one too. That's just so far on this one. Of course, it's not dry. And here, the camera shows a lot more primer coming through than what I could see in person. But I've still got layers to do on this. I'm not very far along yet. And that's the trick to. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Ralph would agree. Actually, I know I've heard Ralph say this, that layers are the key. And thin dilutions that you slowly build up gives you a diversity that you just can't get with wood strong application. Not to mention a strong application of paint dilutes detail. So, thin coats. And what I did is I primed this wall and then individually painted some stones. And I don't know if I can get them where you can see them. Let's see. There's a few, there's a couple stones up in this area that are a couple bricks that are painted, some individual bricks here and here. But I don't think I can get it to where you can see it on camera.
Okay, so I can see it now.
Yep. And I painted those immediately after primer coat. But I think I'll get a better effect if you do those individual bricks mid-process. So I got the base red color, and I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to come back with a light dilution of red and fill in the gaps again.
The burning question becomes, what did you prime it with? Especially working on MDF, you really have to seal its surface.
Yep, and I used Rust-Oleum. Yeah, Rust-Oleum. I use Rust-Oleum paint for all kinds of things. No, I put a color on it. On the plastic, I used a gray, but it was hard. It's not a warm enough color in my opinion. So on the wood, I use I think it's called khaki. No, khaki or sand. Actually, I think it's called sand. It's the camouflage Rust-Oleum sand color, and I wanted a warmer brick because this structure is supposed to be
It's
quite old.
it's from the camouflage series, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
sir. I'm a huge fan of those
it's
paints.
ultra flat. It's very nice.
And it's quite thin, so it doesn't seem to, if you paint it, if you spray correctly and, start off the surface, go all the way across, finish off the surface, like like you should with airbrush or any spray, it seems to not destroy detail very, very much like some sprays do. It's a very thin application and a very controlled application of paint that I just couldn't be happier with.
Yeah, there's no buildup if you do it that way.
Absolutely. Now you use Tamiya, right? That's what you're such a fan of,
Uh,
Brad?
Tamiya paints, Vallejo paints, um, and depending on what I'm working on, I'll use the Tamiya on the plastic and some of the Vallejo paints. Um, I have some of the craft paints that you talk about, but like I don't have to go to Wally World. I have my Jane World upstairs. I steal them from my wife. Um,
Nice.
the best one, the best one is Americana,
Okay.
and it's made by Deco Art. And the reason I say the best one is because the particulate that's in this is very fine, and one coat of this will cover a white piece of plastic, like one brushstroke. Whereas if you get the apple barrel or the accent, um, they're all water based, they're all acrylic, but it seems like the other ones, the ones that you pay the 55 cents for, or $1 or whatever, um, they're thinner or less pigment in the paint. So you have to do 2 coats sometimes, but that's not a bad thing. As long as you realize the difference between the two, you can use that to your advantage.
And sometimes that's a desired effect. And in my case, that's what I wanted, and I further diluted it. But part of the reason that I am such a fan of the Vallejo paint is that the particulate in it is just, I mean, it covers exceptionally well. And while, I mean, I come from, from polyscale, scale coat era as well, and I'm a complete fanboy of polyscale paints. I think they were just, second to none. But in the absence of polyscale, Vallejo took me some adjustment. And Johnny was on Hangouts when I first started playing with, and being frustrated with the Vallejo paints. But once you've learned the particulars of working with it, I like the Vallejo paint quite well.
Yeah. Now with Vallejo paints and I guess most acrylics, if you go to an artist store, you can buy what they call retarder or acrylic medium that will thin
Yep.
the paint for you, and it doesn't it doesn't thin it like water does. It works a little better, but it's all in personal preference.
Have you ever used a wet canvas? Like I watched a guy today, or maybe the last couple of days, using a piece of wax paper laid over a sponge
Yeah,
as a platform.
it's called a wet palette.
Yeah, wet palette. That's what I meant. And that was just, and he was explaining the justification for that, and it was fascinating. I haven't went to the trouble of trying that, but part of the problem I get is I always have to put such small amounts of acrylic out because if I'm working with details, they don't set up, but they skim.
Well, they do to some extent with the wet palette as well, just not as much.
Sure. Yeah, it slows that process down some. That would make sense.
Okay, I have a little tool tip if anybody is interested. This particular kit, I had to take. They have the resin impregnated paper and a thin piece of veneer that is going to make up the front of this hot dog stand.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to hold them together, you have to glue it, and you want to make sure it glues flat. So you've probably all seen these things. Now this might look a little different because I reversed the rungs on it. It's clothes pegs.
Yep.
They make great clamps. So I used a piece of wood to make it stay flat, and clamp the end of it, clamp it with another one,
Bingo.
and I don't have to worry about it warping.
Mm.
Now, normally I would have put it under something heavy, but my heavy item is sitting right here and I'm using it already. So I had to do something else.
Well, those make really good, the clothespins done that way make really good grippers for painting items too, so you can hang on to it while you paint. I'm really fond of those, of doing it that way.
This is going to be fun.
So I basically, and I finished off enough bricks on this wall that I could carry on and put and my paint's quite thin, so one more cover coat over top so that they don't stand out so much. Like, I don't think there's another expression that does the job, but so they don't stand out like a turd in a punch bowl. So
Nice.
I can't. It's not exactly like a sore thumb. It looks like, you know, those, you want those individualized colored, dark colored bricks. They're awesome, but you don't want them to just pop out at you either. I mean, unless you do. Now I'm going to do some scraping of some of the bricks later, but I want to get mortar in before I scrape some of the bricks too. So because otherwise your mortar has a tendency to fill. Another way to do that I think is fascinating is to take your X-Acto and tear off some of the surfaces of bricks, and then use some liquid masking over that area when you put your mortar on.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, your mortar fills that whole area up, and you get a big wide area, and that's not what happens on the real thing. So you don't want that to happen.
Phil Wyman's got a comment. Phil's comment is when using a retarder or extender to your acrylic paint, it takes longer to dry than normal dry time, but it seems to flow a little better too, because I've used the extender on those craft paints the other day, and I like the way it flowed on.
Yeah, but you don't have to use a whole lot.
No, very
Just
little.
a little.
But I've got a flow, acrylic flow enhancer. I don't know how different that is from a retarder that I use on some of my artist tube acrylics, and that seemed to help, especially with doing rock work. It allowed it to to gather better
Right.
into the crevices. So I'm gonna start working on some windows too. I've done some pre stuff on mine as well, on some of my detail parts, on the doors, which are a wood. You know, they're meant to be a wood. So I have pre-stained those doors. I used the same stain, the 100 line stain. This stuff's just exceptional.
Absolutely.
But it's hard to beat that stuff. But I'm real fond of driftwood. But I wanted some of them to be darker along the bottom, so I used some, even pre-painting it. I used some AIM powders or AIM powders with the that I used the AIM powders out in a tray and put a couple drops of the stain of the 100 line stain in it to make a paste and rub that into the wood to get that finish, which also means it's going to be, give it a certain effect when I go to remove some of that paint from these doors, because I want them to be quite weathered. Whereas the windows are steel, or iron rather, sorry, iron windows. So I peeled all of them from the sprue. I know a lot of people pre-paint stuff on the sprues, but I just don't. So I peeled all of them off and took. My wife laughs at me for this, but I call these sanding sticks. I tell her to bring me some sanding sticks, but a nail file. I mean, I've got a slew of these things and a bunch of different,
Grit.
grits. Yeah, and they're great. So I straightened all the edges up because these window castings, or window laser cut windows seat into these frames, and laser cut is very, very exacting. So you can take this wall, lay it flat, and just press that window into position, and it's very exacting where it's going to set. So you want to lightly sand any leftovers from the sprue.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm also going to have that window seat, or what's that called?
The sill.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's what I've been called it too. There's another name for it they use in the instructions that I had heard before, but I just wasn't thinking of. But that concrete seal, I've got to prep those to put those in. But I will
Just
seat these windows
a
and
little
then
word
put the
of
glass
advice,
behind them. Yes,
Andy.
sir.
Just a little note:
Of
when
course.
you're putting the windows in, make sure your wall is flat on the table.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you could push right through the window. I mean,
Oh yeah, yeah.
window
They're gentle. They're delicate. Now, I know a lot of people suggest that they do not have good luck with the hairspray trick on wood. And I would say you may not have good luck with that effect on a raw wood or on just a stained wood, maybe. But I've had pretty good luck using it, especially over top of a paint. So I'm gonna use hairspray uh, and coat this, and then put a finish coat over top of it, and then we'll see how well that scrapes, because that's what I want, is that paint to be quite peeled. And I'm going to use kind of a buff sandy color on this. Um, Also, these walls, something I might want to mention, I masked the top and bottom of the wall for a couple reasons. The bottoms of these walls have a stone foundation to them, and I masked that stone foundation and pre-painted it with a beige, with that same
your primer color.
camo. Yep, that same camo paint. Well, actually, I think I used a different color. I think I used beige on one of them and camo, or beige on one of them and sand on the other. The sand was a little. The beige gave me a less brown color for that slatey style, or that sandstone style rock that was typically used for foundations in the Mid-Appalachian region. But I'm going to use that same color, uh, or my same primer color for my tree, or for my windows. And I haven't decided about doors yet. I may use a different color for them. A lot of times, it's not uncommon to see doors done in, almost turquoise or bright red. So, how you coming along, Mike?
I'm playing with windows. So I'm using the old gallery glass to fill in my windows. But thinking in terms about what you were saying too about the different stains and all, one technique I used, let me see, I have it right here. Oh, yes, I do. Was that I used the Hunter Line red stain on this caboose, as kind of the base coat, and then I took some of the red apple barrel paint too as well to kind of give it more texture, because the red stains look good. Well, actually, even before that, I put the driftwood on there too, just to give it some darkness. And if you look down the bottom there too, you can see all the darker. I really just try to darken up the bottom there, because that's where all your dirt's going to be. And then I put the red on there, the red Hunter Line stain, and then I went with the red paint, and I really just kind of confined the paint to the upper half of these walls here. So it gives you a nice effect. I mean, you can do all sorts of things, but with this, I mean, and the deal is layering and a little bit of patience. Don't expect the finished model with one brush stroke. That's just not going to happen.
Do you use a wet on wet technique for applying the red acrylic in with that stain?
Yeah, actually, I did, because I really don't have any patience. So I'm just like, I'm going to town. I get the as soon as I got the driftwood down on there and it looked pretty decent, then I got the red hunter line. I was going with that next, and I'm like thinking, well, it's just not as, you know, it's too opaque, really. I mean, the stain's a little too opaque. I want a little darker, more color. Then I threw
Sure.
the apple barrel on it too, and then it's like, well, that the bottoms need a little more, so put a little black there. And the one thing too is, if you use like a darker stain, if you just touch the brush filled with the hunter line stain to the very bottom, the bottom side of the wall, the capillary actions will take that back up there too, and it'll give you a nice effect. So you don't even have to brush it up or nothing like that. It's not like when you're doing styrene, you're doing like the rust pattern on the top of a freight car, where you have to streak it down. Now you just kind of push the brush up to the bottom, and the wood will do the work for you, which is really cool.
Well, it has a very natural effect, because that's what's happening in the real world, is that it's using, capillary or capillary action, or it's using the absorption properties of that wood for that discoloration. That's what's really happening in the real world. But and I know there's a lot of ways to get different effects. I've used several of them. On the BTS kit, I used the mineral spirits and acrylic paint to get a peeled paint effect, which was fascinating to me. I've used a lot of chalks to get that effect, but boy, you can't get a cheaper modeling trick than this god-awful smelling stuff right here. But it doesn't get any cheaper of a modeling trick. And this is one of the best glues in the world. I mean, we make trees out of it. I glue dirt down with the stuff. I mean, I use it in some of my
hair.
I don't, I'm not stylish enough to need it on my hair, really, but
my mom used to do it. I mean, I know how that stuff smells, man. I grew up smelling it.
It's awful, but it works great. And for this, you just got to let it set up. Now, I'm going to start doing it with an airbrush. I probably won't buy another can of that. I'll probably buy some pump hairspray and start doing it with that, through one of my cheap airbrushes, because I've heard good things about the amount of control you get. And the stuff on wood, it dries up quite quick. So here, very quickly, this will set up enough. I mean, I need to give it a couple minutes, but in a couple minutes, this will set up enough that I could put a coat over top of it, and then we could use a skewer or a hard bristle brush with some damp brush to peel paint, and it's an exceptional technique. But you've got to have these multiple techniques in your arsenal. There are there are reasons to use salt weathering, and there's reasons to use the mineral spirits and acrylic techniques, and the hairspray tricks, and the AK and Big Ammo products. There are, and diversity is part of the game as well. In the real world, things out in the world don't all weather the same. So, if you use a single trick, your layout may have too cohesive of a weathered effect, possibly. That's somewhat of my opinion about it, and I know people use this technique a lot on plastics and argue. I've had several people argue with me, which everybody knows me knows I love when people do that. Argue with me about hairspray on wood, but I've had success with this already. Over painted wood, I don't know about it working over a natural unfinished wood. I think it would just absorb the hairspray, but on a painted wood, it seems to work.
Exactly right. It'll soak into the wood, and it won't work right.
Yep. But it seems to, it's just a retarder. It's in the same sense as we were just talking about. It is meant to reduce the adhesion of the paint that we're applying. And then as we scratch at it a little bit and put some water in there so that water could float that paint off, some of that paint that we put over top of this will just peel off in layers. And you want to put your paint on and let it set up for a little bit. But, you want to let that paint that we're going to put on over top of this, again, kind of skim. You do not want to let that paint, or at least in my experience, you don't want to let that paint completely set up, but you just want to let it skim over.
You
You know,
can.
sort of that dry to the touch. Can you get it off after if it's completely dried?
Well, you're doing it on wood,
I
right?
am.
And
Yes, sir.
what your explanation's just a little bit off. What the hairspray does when you wet it, it dissolves, and your brush then gets underneath the paint, and that the underside of the paint hasn't cured yet,
Yep.
and it starts to peel it. And that's what happens. It's not that it retards the paint. It just makes it easier to get under it.
That makes sense. I tell you, it seems like if I hairspray wood, I could pretty much take all the paint back off from it again if I wanted to. It's like it puts a barrier
You could.
on it.
Yeah,
Whereas if I paint on wood, it doesn't. It would adhere.
yeah. I mean, the hairspray is basically alcohol. So I mean, you know, alcohol's like a acrylic paint thinner, really. So you could probably do it out. But one interesting thing too is since you're working with wood, to get the paint off, you can use like your razor saw or your wire brush to scratch some of that paint off too. You know, you just take it off like it would naturally
Exactly.
come off.
That's another way. But the original way that was meant, that's similar to hairspray on wood, was mineral spirits. You paint your rust color on the wood or your dark color on the wood,
Mm-hmm.
then you soak it with mineral spirits, and then you paint your craft paint on top of it. And before it has a chance to thoroughly dry, you put a piece of tape over it, or you scribe it with your number 11 blade a few times, and then put a piece of the Scotch brand tape over it and just peel it off. And it takes pieces of paint off with it.
Absolutely. I did that with I did some experimentation with that technique beforehand, and then I did that technique on the BTS kit, and I had exceptional results with it. It is one of the single best techniques for the type of effect I wanted on vertical walls, vertical wood walls where the paint peels off in kind of strips. You know, if you've looked at a building that hasn't been painted in 50 years or something, it's like the paint is just hanging there loose and it's coming off in layers, in peeled strips. Whereas with the windows, what I want is a more scratched paint effect where, you know.
Wire brush is the calling. Here's two brushes that I have. One of them, the one that's a white tip, is fiberglass strands, and it is a brush. The other one is a wire brush, stainless steel bristles, and I use these for weathering wood. I use the white one mostly for taking paint off of plastic, like on the side of a box car where you have, say, the Santa Fe logo.
Yep.
And you want to make it look like the Santa Fe has worn, the paint's worn off at the bottom of it. You use the fiberglass brush, and it works well. The wire brush I use on wood for sure.
I've got to order me some of those.
Micromark has these. You could probably get these at Harbor Freight too. The fiberglass one was originally designed to be a burnishing tool for automotive distributor points, but they don't have points anymore. Right? It's all electronic now.
You know, Andy, you brought up an interesting point I just wanted to touch on too about how you need a diversity on your layout. I was thinking too, when I'm building models like in a vacuum, if I'm not really just kind of putting them together, just regular structures, I tend to use the same color scheme all the time. It's always like an off-white with green, you know, for my wooden structures. And, you know, having a couple family buildings like that in the layout's kind of cool, but what you really need is that diversity. You know, I mean, you need that, you know, crazy green and pink Victorian house, you need a red house, you need the yellow house, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things I found too is that to kind of force the diversity is to basically farm out some of the buildings you want to other people to do for you. and let them just basically just give them a directive like, hey, I want this building done. Just do it up. And they're like, oh, what color you want? It's like, well, I don't care. You just do it. And you just give them that nebulous directive. And usually they'll come up with something that you wouldn't even have dreamed of doing there. And then, you put in there and it looks like, everybody's doing their own thing, just like in real life.
I'm too fussy.
Now,
I couldn't do that.
no,
I end up redoing it because it's not the way I'd want it.
Yeah.
right. I couldn't either. I feel like I'd have to do it myself too. But one way to ensure that you get some diversity is to, of course, find multiple techniques that work, but is to add to your.
We lost your audio. Or did we lose my audio?
Oh, you should first though.
Boy,
No,
I love Google. Boy, I love Google. To add to your repertoire a selection of techniques. And while it's a good idea to use a similar paint scheme, railroads would traditionally paint all of their stations and section houses and tool sheds and all that stuff in a similar paint scheme. That's quite common. But, each house in a town and each neighbor would not have that same. So, your railroad buildings having a common theme, your freight cars and such having common themes, that makes a lot of sense. But
right, exactly. And that's where I need the diversity when I go in the residential sections.
yes, sir. So now I've got a buff finish on my windows. How you guys coming along under your build? I see Ralph's. Take a look over and see what he's getting done.
But the big steel blocks in the way.
Oh my gosh. Looks like he's ready to serve up a weenie.
Almost. Almost. Mm-hmm.
That's got some interesting signage. Is that where it says eat? Is that is that like a stencil for doing coloration, or is that the sprue that individual letters come out of, or
What are we talking about? This here?
it says that little sign.
This is a template for spraying on the side on a painted sign on the side of the building.
That's what I figured it was. And I had thought about doing a masking, and actually I'm thinking about getting with Dave from Dave's Decals and get him to print me a mask that I could do letters with, because it would be on decal film. It would be nice, and you could press that decal film in there, paint, and then peel it back off. I got my windows. I normally let the paint set up in just a couple minutes. I assume that you can let it set up further, but I've had the best luck by just letting it set up a couple minutes and then kind of going to town on it. Paint my doors with a different color.
You realize I won't be able to leave this until the next time we get together, right? I'll have to finish it.
That's fine.
Well, I mean, I'm looking forward to you. What I'm looking forward to you doing some work on that ITLM kit. Imagine that laser art kit, like ITLA kit, like I'm working on too, just because I'm just fascinated with their stuff right now. I'm not easily impressed, but his seeing the craftsmanship as I open the box, I'm pretty impressed.
Yep.
Paint my doors, and I'll be right back over there, and we'll scratch these windows off and see how old we can make them look.
How old do you want them to look?
I'm like, as always, I'm modeling off from a photo. Unfortunately, I'm modeling off a black and white photo, so I'm having to guess more than I generally am comfortable with. But what are you going to do?
That's because model railroading is an art.
Well, until I get a DeLorean there's going to be some guessing. So I've opted for colors that were appropriate for the era. They tore this structure down a long, long time ago. It was there in 1950, but it was quite old. It's in the small town of St. Paul, Virginia at that time. It was a lingerie factory.
There you go.
Now, keep in mind, we're talking about 1920s and 30s lingerie, so think bloomers, and you'll be a lot closer. But
They're
it's
coming
a large,
back.
Okay.
Bloomers are coming back, dude.
but it's a large brick structure, quite large brick structure. And some of the pictures I have of the era had, 8 or 10, freight cars sitting on that siding. So, it's an industry that could take, a bit of activity on my railroad. And since I have a coal hauling railroad, it's nice to have decent industries that could do some decent freight load, some decent movement. Because otherwise, most industries on a coal hauling railroad are only, can only justify a boxcar here and there. So
I have a question for you that we didn't touch on. What glue?
Sir.
What glue are you going to use?
Yeah, okay, so I'm not a super glue fan much. I've got plenty of it. I'll use it for certain things, but super glue gets brittle, and I don't care much for it. So working with wood structures, I use wood glue. I use Gorilla brand wood glue, or I got some of that Faller stuff. What's that stuff called, Johnny?
Was the Fowler expert or?
Yes. Yep, I got a bottle of that over here too, and it's really good if you need some time.
I have one that you guys might fall in love with. Maybe you're already using it. I don't know. It also
Is it deluxe?
it also doubles as windows. The military guys, the military and aircraft guys use this stuff. It's called canopy glue.
Canopy glue, yeah.
That stuff right there.
It's a form of PSA glue. That glue, it dries clear. They use it to apply canopies to model aircraft.
Yep.
And the dry time is like 5-7 minutes, and you're working.
Yep.
You can move
same
on.
brand. And I got that same brand you do.
Yep.
I use that for setting my windows. I will set my walls with Gorilla brand wood glue.
Okay.
And I will.
But Andy, you got to be careful with Gorilla brand wood glue. It has to be moistened, and it expands.
No, that's Gorilla brand glue. Regular Gorilla glue is a polyurethane glue, and it does expand because it's basically a foam. But Gorilla brand wood glue is still basically the same as an Alber's wood glue. It's just that Alber's. It's just the brand.
There you go. Sorry, it's just the same as this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing as that. It's just a wood glue. I just happen to like this brand pretty well, and it has a good consistency. Now, I like their polyurethane glue too for certain applications, but
that's fine.
I've had great luck with it. It's really solid. I'm really happy with the Gorilla brand stuff. I like everything they make, really. So
I use this Weld Bond.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
Yeah, I used Type Bond 2 wood glue. I like that.
Yep.
Can't go wrong with that either. Weld Bond is really popular amongst modelers, especially the modelers of the Canadian persuasion for some reason. But
Canadian? What's wrong with Canadian?
not a doggone thing, brother. The only complaint I got is they won't let me in. But
Sure,
we'll let you in.
Again, but we'll let you in.
They'll let you in, but you won't be able to come back.
Yeah, I'm in Vancouver next week, as it were. I go up to I fly out Sunday. I'll be up till Wednesday in Vancouver. So no fault there. So what are you working with? You cut windows, bruh?
No.
Okay.
Shit. Pardon me. Pardon my French.
Are you Canadians in your French language? So this is, I don't know that camera would do this as much justice as I would like, but this is the, and again, people argue with me that you can't use hairspray on them, but this second row, you could, let's see if I get it where you can see if that's going to be visible. That second row of windows there has had part of its paint removed and scratched off, and you could see
Oh yeah, look at that.
it's exposed.
Well,
Yeah,
what
you can see it above
what
it.
color is exposed?
That's okay. So it's the dark camo color as the base because they were ironed windows, so they would be the color of a steam boiler, you know.
Mhm.
And then I overcoated them with with the lightest buff colored paint I had, which at the moment these are still wet, so they will be slightly darker. The paint is not very wet, but I've got water on them, so they're slightly darker than the paint will ultimately adhere to. But of course, if you put that paint over top of that base of camo, it's going to be darker on its own anyway. So, but I wanted them to I wanted a light enough color that the paint itself would pop out of the brick. And from what I see on layouts, the best color tends to be a much more contrasted color that would necessarily be required in the real world. So I would typically say paint your windows a lot lighter trim color than you may choose to do on your own home.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's where the artistry comes in there too, because you want people to see that the windows are they're weathered, and you really have to call their attention. You got to draw their eye to it, and one way to do it is with the higher contrast.
Well,
Right.
and you weren't on the last show, Mike. We hadn't stoled you back yet, but I used Sierra Scale models. They have this window material that is like a microscope tile, but I mean, you can't tell I'm holding anything, but it's a glass window. It's a real glass window.
Okay, yeah, it's like a
And
slide
then
cover.
it's like it is, yes, and it's roughly half the thickness of the cover glass. It's incredibly delicate. You can't cut it on a mat because just putting it on the mat and touching it and it'll pop. But
Okay.
and you got to use a carbide tip pencil to cut the stuff. But if you want to be able to see through to the interior, or if you really value the nice reflection that you get from real glass, there is something about that material for windows. They're just really something.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that the knocks I would have against gallery glass. It gives you the reflection, but it doesn't have the smoothness of real glass. You know, you can tell that it's, and in some ways you probably want the effect if it's an older building, and you know how the glass kind of melts and goops up like that. But just having that nice uniform thickness,
Or if you don't have it, or if you don't have an interior, for example, you may want to, that may be important to you if you don't have an interior. But on
right, you want
any of the
obscure.
structures, that's right. On most of my structures, I don't necessarily have a lot of structures anyway on the layout. Surely not yet, but this town I have that I'm building will only have about 40 or 50 structures in it. All of them that you could get any sight line to see, I'm going to put it interiors, or at least a faked interior in. So the windows being good translucent is important to me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's get caught up with everybody. How are you coming along? How much did you get done on yours, Mike?
Not a lot. I just did my windows. I put
Did you
glass in
put
my windows.
and you did use the gallery glass. See, I see that
Yeah.
gallery. I've seen a few people use that stuff and talk about it, and I got to see it on when Barry did the last show we had. He used the gallery glass and showed the technique and showed how rigid it gets and how quickly. I never used it, and it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's an interesting product. I mean, here's a DPM kit that I put it on into different windows as well. Well, the main windows are acetate, but you know, the windows on the second and third story are gallery glass, and the doors.
Oh yeah,
gives you a nice little effect. And it does, you know what's nice though? It does give you the nice reflective quality. So it does have that. It's just it's not a very you know, flat glass. It looks like it has a lot of texture, you know, like real old glass.
But I think it would work great for these type of windows that I have here that have these very small holes to set it in. That would work great. And if it wasn't for the fact that I wanted people to be able to see through these really well, I think I may have been, you know, tried that stuff.
Oh yeah, I mean it's definitely worth trying. And the nice thing about gallery glass, it tends to fill a bigger hole than even canopy cement. I mean, I think canopy cement the maximum range is about like 1/8 of an inch, and this will do like a a half, quarter inch, maybe a half inch if you spread it carefully. So,
but I use the canopy glue to set my glass because it's clear, and like CA will frost glass, or especially acetate, but it'll even frost actual glass too. I assume it will, or I've heard people say that. I quit using CA on windows a long time ago, years ago. But even plastics glues have their issues with doing that, and using the canopy glue, I just use it to set my acetate or to set my this glass that I'm using. I also use the canopy glue around lights. So like where I'm gluing, LED fixtures in, or globes over my, over my LED lights.
oh, absolutely. It makes a great lens. Now, I mean, every time you bring up the thing, and I have to do this because Barry's not here, but every time you bring up the word canopy glue, Barry has to chime in and says, "Oh, well, there's clear tacky glue."
Yeah,
it does the same thing. And I'm like,
no, that doesn't dry that stuff.
no, that's just what I was gonna say. It's like, and you know what? The thing I found about this tacky glue too, that I kind of didn't like it. I tried to glue wood together with it too, and it just didn't seem to stick. It just didn't really.
No.
It just seemed like it was goop.
Are you talking about like an Eileen's tacky glue or something like that?
Yeah, that's the one. Arlene's clear tacky glue. I mean,
I really love it.
I love the regular tacky glue. The clear, I just like. Really
nice. Yeah, I haven't used the clear. I use Eileen's, but it's for scenery stuff. I would use it. I use it for substructure stuff, but not generally.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer the wood glue, but in a pinch, I would use the tacky glue to do wood. I mean,
sure.
I did this little A-frame here with the tacky glue, and you can see it's pretty delicate and smallish, but it held together pretty well.
Well, it works good if you don't have a lot of surface area. Where wood glue excels is when you have surface area. But Eileen's works pretty good without having surface area. I use it for putting curtains in and stuff because it has you don't have a lot of surface area on the curtains of that tacky glue, and it also gives you working time, and it doesn't. They don't want to slide down while you're trying to work on them. But I use Eileen's for a big portion of my scenery work, and I have the Eileen's spray adhesive in a spray, and it is the best material for making trees, in my opinion. It's better than like Super 77 or something. Well, boys, we're about getting to a point to a stopping point where things are going to have to dry for me, and I have to do some catching up before the next show and get the rest of my walls painted up so that we can do some serious assembly where we can set windows and put glass. And what I'm excited about is getting started on some serious interior work and some LED lighting and framing, that stuff. I'm just quite excited about that process on this structure specifically. If you guys are at a good stopping point as well, then we'll reconvene in a number of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to get too far ahead of Barry and Miles,
They're probably working on their stuff right now.
I bet they're done their stuff right now too, and they're just going to come up and bring something they did like 3 years ago.
Doing homework.
Yeah, that's not fair. And Barry, no argument. He won't have any problem catching up whatsoever. But I've never seen anybody model as quickly as Miles. And what hurts my feelings about that is he gets as good a result as I do, and at that pace.
But he's learned the shortcuts. That's why.
And
Well,
he's been doing it for 1,000 years. Miles is as old as Methuselah.
Well, like he argued, he had done it professionally, and in my line of work, if it takes me a long time to do something, I can't make a profit at it. But it's one thing I don't allow myself to do at home is to rush because every day I rush. So by modeling, I don't want to rush. So
no, that makes perfect sense too.
Well, if we don't have any more comments or questions in the Q&A, and I think we've just got to cover a few materials today and had some questions there, then I'm really glad anybody who joined in the panel. I would really love to see some people working along with us on any kit whatsoever, as long as it's a something in the vein of fine scale that we're doing. Does not have to be craftsman, does not have to be wood, just as long as your end result is similar to what we are trying to achieve with fine scale construction. I'd love to see your work and talk to you about it on regular hangouts or post it in the G Plus community. But any questions that you have as well about this or things that you'd like to see us target for the upcoming shows, we're going to be spending a number of months. I'm going to be spending a number of months on this kit. I know Mike is going to be spending a number of months on his, and the one that Miles and Barry has as well. They're going to be spending some time with. I'm really anxious for Ralph to get started on that. Imagine that laser art kit like I am as well. So you're going to be seeing us continue to work through these particular projects for a number of months, and we're really going to take them. We're going to take this pretty far out. But thank you very much for joining us tonight. So back to you in the studio, Johnny.
Okay. Yeah, we'll learn you yet. All right. I just want to say keep checking in on YouTubeModelBuilders.com website for all the latest news and info on the Tuesday and Wednesday presentations, the eMag, and the live show schedules. The live show is once every month. The eMag is bi-monthly. The Tuesday show and the Wednesday show that we have now, both of those, the time is an hour earlier than the Thursday and the Saturday show. They are at 8 o'clock Central, 9 o'clock Eastern time. Thursday and the Saturday live show is still at 9 o'clock Central, 10 o'clock Eastern time. I want to say, while you're on the website, YouTubeModelBuilders.com, be sure and click on the e-magazine. JD and his team do a great job at putting that magazine out. Have some fantastic articles. We've got a good crew of people that work on the magazine. It's got a lot of contributing authors, too, for the articles. So you want to be sure and check that one out. And don't forget, the magazine is free. Doesn't cost you a thing. Just sign up for an email notification. Okay, we're at the end of the month. I was a week ahead of myself last week when I said that, but this week it's for real. The next show we've got is going to be the Thursday show, and that will be on the 27th in 2 days. So come on in and join us for a Thursday show. General topic. Who knows what it's going to be about or who's going to be on it, because last week we actually had the professor, Mr. Prof himself from Australia. He popped in on us last week. So that was a nice surprise. I want to say thank you for participating in tonight's show. And we shall see you next month. Barry and Miles should be back with us then. And we'll be able to get to see what they're going to be working on also. So thank you, and we'll catch you later.